Today I would like to teach you how to crochet a long Santa hat using faux fur yarn, the red yarn, which is Bravo yarn, with the moss stitch. I'm really excited because it's really easy. It is a very, very long hat that you can use for the holiday season. So let me show you how easy it is to crochet this Santa hat. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. You will need two different types of yarn. I have Brava yarn. I have this gigantic skein. You can always have a small skein for this. I just got the big one because I use a lot of red during the holiday season. And then also have here the Fable Fur yarn, super bulky. So this is super bulky and worsted yarn, both from We Crochet or Knit Picks. There's a link down below in the description if you want to grab your own. You will also need some hooks. I have here a G hook for the worsted weighted yarn. I have an N hook for the Fable Fur yarn, a tapestry needle, and some scissors. That's all you're going to need for this hat. So you're going to start with your faux fur yarn. Okay, so you're going to take your N hook, make a chain slip knot. Then you're going to crochet 5 chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now you're going to start for the second chain from the hook and going to crochet single crochets. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now you're going to turn and crochet. Keep crocheting single crochets, okay? So how long are you going to make this ribbing for? Well, you're going to reference the reference table in the written pattern, okay? I have a table over there, so you're going to check it out. And you're going to look how long you need to make this for, because this is your circumference around your head, right? So because this is slightly stretchy, you probably want to subtract about 2 centimeters or so, or maybe an inch roughly from the measurements. So unless you have the model with you, you probably want to do that. So at least an inch or so you want to subtract so that you know how long you need to make this ribbing for, right? So be aware with this yarn that you can't really see your stitches. You're going to have to kind of feel your stitches, because obviously me holding it like this, you probably can't even see it because it's so fuzzy. However, because of the way the yarn is made, it is really interesting because you can actually feel it very well. And I even can poke my finger through so you know exactly where you are. So just keep on going and making your ribbing according to the head size that you need the Santa hat for. Once you have your ribbing, you will come back here so I can show you how to make the rest of the hat. Okay, so I just made here a little sample, right? This is going to be different for every single one, right? Okay, so once you finish your long ribbing, you're going to fold this in half and you're going to slip stitch those 4 stitches, right? You have 4 stitches per row. So you're going to do 4 slip stitches, 1 in each, right? So just to combine the last row with the first row, pretty much. That's what you're doing. Okay, and then once you're finished, you can pull this out and then sew it up, right? So weave in your ends. I'm just going to leave it for now over here just to show you what to do next. So I'm just going to make a knot here. Make sure though, if you do make knots, that it's from the inside, so kind of flip it around. And now we're going to go and start the moss stitch. So for that, you're going to switch your hooks to your G hook, and you don't need your faux fur yarn right now anymore, but you do need your red yarn. So I have worsted weighted yarn. This is the Brava yarn. Okay, so then you're going to attach your Brava yarn and you're going to do a chain of 1. And now what you're going to do is you're going to place 2 single crochets in each row of the Fable Fur yarn, okay? If you have very tight tension, you may want to do once in a while just 1, But the idea behind it is that you are doing a very even distribution of single crochets on that edge here. Sometimes you even have to add more single crochets. So the best thing to do is just start and play around with it and see how many stitches you're going to need. For example, for an adult hat, I did 80 of them. So there was 80 single crochets in the end. So you want to have a little bit more than you normally do. So if you for example, if you do normally for an adult hat 70 stitches, go a little bit higher. Why? Because this is a moss stitch. And the moss stitch is a single crochet with a chain, right? So that's going to make this a little bit tighter, and it's almost going to feel like it's only 40 stitches when you have 80, right? So be aware of that. So make it nice and filled in the beginning here until you start with your moss stitch. Okay, so now once you've finished, you have just a row of single crochets. We're now going to go in continuous rounds, so you're not doing a slip stitch or anything. You're going to start now with the moss stitch. Okay, so you're going to start with a single crochet, then you're doing a chain of 1, and then you're skipping a stitch and going to the next one. So single crochet, chain of 1, skip 1, and single crochet. So that's the moss stitch, right? So you're going to continue on doing this all the way around. So you're going to skip a stitch every time you do a chain of 1, right? So you're going to end up with half the amount of single crochets that you had in the beginning, and the other half is pretty much replaced with the chain of 1. So once you reach the end, you're going to always place your single crochet in the chain space, okay? So continue until the end of the round. So single crochet, chain of 1, skip 1, single crochet, chain of 1, skip 1. Okay, so now here I am where I have now the moss stitch, right? So you're going to place your single crochet always in the chain space, right? So go in between and just do your single crochet, chain of 1, and then every time do your single crochet in the chain space. So you're going to continue on, and you're going to reference the reference table. There's a link in the description for that, okay? It has a reference table. That's the written pattern, has the reference table. And that table, it's going to show you how long the height of the hat needs to be for a specific head size, okay? So that's how long you're going to crochet it. And you're going to start measuring it from here. So from here to, let's say, here, okay? This is the head side of the specific head that you're making this hat for. Once you reach that point, that's when you're going to decrease. That means you're going to continue on with your moss stitch until that point. Again, reference the written pattern for that. Makes it much easier. And then you're going to come back here, and then you're going to watch the rest of the video. You can watch it already if you like, so that you know the entire picture, because then we're going to do decreases. We're going to decrease the moss stitch, and then we're going to do a few rounds of just the moss stitch and decreasing rounds and so forth until we're going to decrease it so much that we just have to sew it together and add the pom-pom, and that's all there is. So continue on with your moss stitch right here until you reach the point of decreases, and that's where I'm going to meet you after that. Okay, so now that you made the hat all the way up to the point of your height, so as I mentioned, you're going to check the reference table for the written pattern, okay? So you're going to make your ribbing, right? Then you're going to start with the moss stitch, and then you work all the way up to about here, which depending on which hat size you're going to pick, right, or make this for, this is how far you're going to go before you start decreasing, okay? So that is the first thing. Once you start decreasing, it's the same pattern throughout. And I'm just going to show you back here, even though it's kind of small, but it really does help you, because that way you don't have to wait so long for me to show you the difference, right? So I'm just going to show you starting from here. It's the exact same thing, just there's more stitches in between, right? But the exact same pattern. So once you finish here, you're going to start decreasing, and you're going to do now what I'm going to show you, okay? Okay, so once you're at this spot right here, as I just mentioned, you're going to have 4 stitch markers. You're going to take your stitch count and you divide it by 4, and that's where you're going to put your stitch markers, okay? So only where the stitch markers are is where you're going to decrease. So we're going to split up the decrease into 2 parts, so that way the side over here is more straight rather than bulky, or kind of bumpy, I should say. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to do your normal moss stitch wherever there is no stitch marker, okay? So for example, right here, you have to do a, so we're right here, right? We have a chain of 1, and now we're going to place here our moss stitch. But now we typically need to do a chain of 1 and then go over. So for the first decreasing round, we're going to skip that chain of 1 right where our stitch marker is. Okay, so you're just going to skip the chain of 1 and you're going to simply do the next single crochet in the next space. So let me say that one more time. Wherever your stitch marker is on the very first round of decreases, you're going to skip your chain of 1 between the single crochets, just where the stitch marker is. Then you're going to do your normal moss stitch as you normally would. So chain of 1, put your single crochet in the chain space, and then here again, single crochet. Here's my stitch marker again, so that means I'm going to skip my chain of 1, and I'm going to place here my single crochet, right? Then I'm going to continue and do my normal moss stitch until I reach my next stitch marker. So right here, I need to skip my chain of 1 because I reached my stitch marker. So right here, just do a normal single crochet and no chain of 1 in between. Then you're going to do the normal moss stitches until you reach the next stitch marker. Right here, single crochet, the chain of 1 is skipped, and another single crochet. Then you do your normal moss stitches again until you reach the area where the stitch marker is again. And that was from the previous round, right? So we now did it 4 times. So right here is where my stitch marker is. And you can see I went over already because I have here a round on top of it where I skipped the chain of 1. So now we're doing the second half of the decrease. That means when I reach that chain space before the stitch marker and a chain space behind the stitch marker, we're now going to combine those, okay? So not directly combine, we're going to skip the one in between, okay? We're not going to place a moss stitch right on top where that stitch marker is, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to place here a single crochet. I'm going to do my chain of 1, but I'm going to skip that space right here where there's supposed to be a moss stitch, but we're doing a decrease. So I'm going to not do that one and go to the one right after, okay? And do my single crochet there and a chain of 1. So there we go. So I just skipped that one in between. So now I'm going to continue, but here it happens to be that so you do your normal moss stitches in between, right, until you reach the same place again. In this case, this is what it is. So you're going to do again a moss stitch over here, so right before that stitch marker. So single crochet and a chain of 1. You're going to skip that space, chain space right here, where we didn't do a chain, right? That space right there where above the stitch marker, you're going to skip, and then you're going to go into the next one and do your normal moss stitch with the chain of 1, right? All you're doing is you're breaking up the moss stitch into 2 parts. On the very first round of decreases, you're skipping a chain, and then the next one, you're skipping the single crochet. So that's what you're doing, right? So we're going to continue until we're done with the round. So now I finished those 2 rounds of decreases. That means I did 1 round of skipping the chain, right where the stitch marker is. And then the next round over, I skipped a single crochet, right? So that way we did a decrease. And you can see now how this is tighter over here already, because in total I skipped 8 stitches, right? Counting a single crochet and a chain of 1, each one as 1 stitch. So that means I skipped 8 of them in total in order to make the decrease. There's other ways to doing a decrease with the moss stitch, but I found this way to be less obvious, so you don't see the decrease very well. Here's, for example, a decrease. You barely see it, right? And then over right here's another one. So it's very hard to see when you do the moss stitch decrease this way. Now what you're going to do after you did your 2 rounds of decreases, you're going to do 5 rounds of normal moss stitch. Okay, the normal moss stitch, that means single crochet, chain of 1 in the chain space, right, and so forth. 5 of them. And then you do the decreasing rounds again. So you're going to continue this until you reach a point where there's not many stitches left, and then you just tie it off. So I'm going to show you how to do that, okay? So now that you did your 5 rounds every single time, so there's barely any stitches left. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pull my yarn through, and I'm going to close up my hole, and then I'm going to attach the pom-pom. So that is how easy it is. So I'm simply going to go through here. I'm just going to go through every moss stitch with my yarn. So you literally just go through every single crochet, right? Like so. And once you reach your point again where you started sewing, that's where you're going to pull tight until it's completely closed, like so. There you go. And there it's closed. Now to make sure it stays closed, you kind of have to, you know, tie it up. I like going through a few times over that area. And since I'm putting a pom-pom on, I don't actually care how that area is going to look like, whether it's bumpy or not. And yes, I'm going to put a knot there just to make sure. Again, as I just mentioned, there is a pom-pom on top, so nobody's going to see that. So like going a couple knots just to make sure nothing is going anywhere. And then I have here my pom-pom, and if you don't know how to make a pom-pom using the Fable Fur yarn, check out my pom-pom video. I have a link down below in the description, as well as the written pattern. It is right there. It's very easy. You only have to remember that you can't see the stitches. You can only feel the stitches. And yes, I have some polyfill or stuffing inside, or if you have like a, you know, ripped old stuffed animal, you can use that stuff too, or leftover yarn, whatever. So this is what I have right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to attach it, right? So I like going through kind of in this area. Do you see how far away this is? I'm not doing it here, otherwise it's just going to wobble. So I want it a little bit closer. That means closer to this. So I'm going to go in here and come back out over here. So about this, I'm going to go through, and yes, I'm using my red yarn because once you sew this properly, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to be seen. And now I'm going to go through here, this area. As you can see, I'm going to pull nice and tight. So I'm going to do this a few times, kind of in a bigger frame. As I said, I'm going in here, coming back out over here. So the more often you do this, the better. It's going to be nice and tight. You do want to pull quite a bit to make sure it doesn't just hang there, right? So I like doing this, let's say, you know, 3-4 times at least, and pull very tight because you don't want to see the yarn in the end, right? So kind of go through here. I'm going to do this one more time, like this area. And if you pull it very tight, you're not going to see the red yarn. So don't pull here, pull on the yarn itself like I do, like I'm pulling right here. And now I'm going to knot it up while I'm holding it tight because I want it to be tight and I don't want it to go anywhere. This, nice and tight. Like so. And then what I like doing is, instead of weaving it in completely, I literally just go through like this. And I'm going to go one more time, Just don't do it super tight, otherwise they can see the red, and you don't want it to see the red, right? Like so. Come back out over here, pull just a bit tighter, and cut your yarn, floof it up, and then there you go. Now, of course, you're going to remove your stitch markers, so you don't want to see those ones on your hat. There you go. And now you are done with your Santa hat. How cute is this? And it's so long. So you start out with the fuzzy yarn right down here. You work your way up with the red yarn and until you have the pom-pom again, right? So if you like the written pattern, make sure you check the link in the description. There's everything you need to make this hat if you want the written instructions, including the reference table that I talked about, so that you can make the hat in any size you wish. Be sure to like, comment, and share this video, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the bell to get a notification the next time I publish a new video. I hope you enjoyed this pattern. I'll see you next time. Bye!